One of the, I think the best parts about being a career coach, especially at my age, I'm 33 right now, and I've been coaching for, uh, you know, 5 to 8 years, depending on how you look at it. When I was still in marketing, I started doing some kind of brand coaching on the side and things like that. But one of the most fascinating things that I've learned while talking to really young people and, talking to older generations is that when someone's like really fresh in their career, they tend to think everything is life or death. They're like, if I don't get this interview, my life is over. If I don't work at, Google, I'm never going to have a career. And then
Right.
I remember some of the stories that I heard when I was younger, where it was like, oh yeah, my uncle like basically just got in a car and drove around the country for like a year and a half before starting his career. And I was like, how did they do that? Like, couldn't even imagine doing that when I was,
hmm
19, 20. And there's these kind of interesting things that happen as you go through your career where you learn how this is all very fluid. Everything is very fluid. Careers are not static, even if you're in the same job for, you look at someone who's been in a job for 30 years and you think, wow, like young people get judgmental. They'll be like, wow, that person never went and adventured and did anything new. And it's like, you don't know what roles they had in that company. They might have had a vast number of like interesting career opportunities just within
hmm
one company. And so there's so much we can learn from these different things. And I think one of the things to keep in mind that as we're talking to people who are maybe in their first or second career transition is like our priorities change throughout our lives and our goals change throughout our lives. And one of the ways that I talk about that with people is, I try and simplify it to like the 3 Ps: people, position, and pay. And just those 3 things can be in wildly different places depending on where you're at in your life, with kids, with money, with all these different things. But I'm curious, what have you seen in regards to like how priorities change throughout our lives, and maybe what should we start thinking about earlier on? Because like, I don't know, I guess what I'm thinking here is like someone who's younger thinks they have it all figured out is like, this is what I know I want to do until I'm 80. It's like, but then you talk to people who are in their 50s and 60s and you're like, I don't know about that. I don't know how certain you can be at this age of like what you're going to like in 50 years. But what have you sort of seen in like the changing priorities as we move through these generational, because we're going to go through generational shifts as we age, right? So like,
hmm
it's not just young people talking to older people, it's the generational shifts that you go through as a person throughout your life. I'm kind of curious what you've sort of seen.
Yeah. I had a really cool meeting with one of our circle members recently. She's in her mid 50s. Um, and well, part of our process is that we onboard everyone individually. So I actually do get to meet a lot of older professionals and hear like, what is the challenge you're having right now? What are you looking to learn, or who are you looking to connect with? So this one woman, Teresa, joined, um, and she is a badass. She worked at Kodak during kind of its glory years, even into its demise a little bit, and saw some of the mistakes that they made. But what was really interesting about my conversation with Teresa is that she told me, and this is a hotly debated topic, she said, you can have it all, just not at the same time. So especially when you look at that conversation among women who are thinking about having kids and growing a family and how that takes a toll on career, she was like, my whole life has been about career. I'm really focused on learning, growing, doing the things that I love, contributing to the world, etc. And I wasn't going to settle for marrying someone who wasn't going to actually add to my life. I didn't want anyone who might be a detractor or not believe in me. I wanted to just continue like that growth. So she basically, and she's in her 50s, so maybe this was really controversial at the time. Now it's maybe more normal. She got married, I think, at 33. And she said from 33 to 37, she just popped out babies. She had like 3 kids. And she said, like, that was a period for me about family. Like I met someone, I was really excited about our partnership, and we were in love and had kids, and my career wasn't a priority then. So she took time off, which is again a big thing that women are always kind of like debating about, how much time should you take off? But she actually took off like 18 years, like really took a break, and decided at the end of that period that she wanted to work as a volunteer for a global charity, and actually went around the world to all different countries speaking on the importance of education, and raising money for the organization. And then now is killing it at a tech company, where she has a really senior role and is totally fulfilled and loves working with the younger employees at the company. And now it's back to work. So I think, to what you were saying about like shifting priorities, I think it's okay when we decide that we need to focus on a part of our life that isn't work. And then there are going to be moments that you're like, it's all about my next, career position right now. And I'm going to like really focus on getting that promotion or getting a new job. And I think that's something that needs to be talked about more, that kind of okayness with looking at the next moment, from the more holistic perspective of life. It's not just about work. The other thing that was really interesting, and I recommend this for anyone who's interested in the cross-generational conversation, there's a book called Okay Boomer, Let's Talk that came out last year by Jill Filipovich. And she was on a podcast with Ezra Klein. And that podcast was really fascinating because it put her, who's a very liberal person, in kind of debate / conversation with a more conservative person about kind of the lifeline and when we're supposed to hit these certain milestones. And I'll long podcast short, I'll just say the most interesting part was we talked about how previous generations looked at marriage as a keystone, and our contemporary generation and world looks at marriage as a capstone. It's something that you have to get all of your ducks in a row, your career, your life, your income, your savings, all of that needs to be like in a certain spot before you can allow yourself to get married. Whereas in the past, it's really been just another piece of that journey. It kind of like, it's sort of like part of just that growth. So I just want to like offer that perspective.
I absolutely love what you're bringing up here, because it really hits on a number of things that if you're only reading, pop articles on LinkedIn, or if you're only reading or only listening to people who are exactly your age, you miss out on a lot of this nuance and a lot of this, making it your own, right? Like that story of where she took 18 years and now she's back in the workforce and she's crushing it. Like the narrative that is generally out there is not that. The narrative is, if you take any time off, your career's over. And it's kind of a fear-based narrative again. I think a lot of this stuff comes back to like, what if I don't hit these milestones? Will my life be over? What if I don't do these things? What's going to happen? And I think your points on marriage here, I need to go listen to that podcast because I just got engaged a couple of weeks ago. So there's a lot of conversations about marriage things happening in my life right now. And I think like I've done a pretty good job of building like a lot of connections in my work life with older folks to be able to talk about career and things like that. And be like, well, what are you doing? You're 47. I'm, 28. Like, what should I be looking out for? I've had those conversations, but my partner and I were like, wait a second, we don't have like a ton of people to talk to about like, what's marriage like 5 years in, what's marriage like 20 years in, what's marriage like, like we just have our parents and like, there's awkwardness there. Right. And so it's like, there's so much like interesting stuff to learn, not just in the working world around these things, but in life as a whole. And I love that you talked about that holistic approach there, because we really do have to look at the entirety of our lives when making these decisions. Because, you see people, if we're going to fast forward to like the cliche kind of conversation that always happens when ageism and work-life balance and all these things come up, it's like at the end of your life, you kind of want to die without regrets, right? So they've done those studies where they ask people like, what do they wish they did more of? And no one said, I wish I worked more. They always say like, I wish I asked that person out, or I wish I spent more time with my family, or I wish I did X, Y, and Z. And that's always a great article to go read and remind yourself of those things. But sometimes, I don't know, we get a little bit like myopic in our thinking, and we kind of lose sight of not only the different things that we're going to want at different times in our lives, but also the ability that we have to control those things, and to be in the driver's seat of those decisions rather than in like the trunk, you know?